This might be a whole nothing of a video, so I apologize for that. But I want to talk about Anne Sexton today, some of her works. I did a reading where I read some of her poems that I really like. I have since taken that down because I did not have a microphone at that time. So, in order to hear anything, you have to amp up the volume to probably 100 to get a faint sound. I do plan to redo that video as well as my introduction to Johnny Got His Gun and as well as There Will Come Soft Rains. Because again, didn't have any microphone. I will not be redoing my mad ramblings because I don't think I can recreate those if I tried. If I sat here right now and tried to talk about Into the Wild, I don't think I could do it. I really don't. So those will be staying up. If you want to watch those, you will have to turn your volume all the way up. Sorry, I'm not changing it. Whatever. Deal with it. Aggressive for no reason. I'm sorry. I wanted to talk about Anne Sexton's poems today because I finally got the complete poems. Can you see that? Those are all sticky notes of poems that I really like. And I'm not even done with it. I still have, I think, 100 and something more pages to go. But I wanted to talk about her because I just find the progression of her poems very interesting. I guess I'll talk a bit about my history with Anne Sexton. I started reading her probably when I was about 16. I really started getting back into reading and writing when I was about the same age. Thank you to the 1989 film Dead Poet Society. That changed my life. Everybody thinks I'm silly for saying that, but it genuinely changed my life. And I was like, oh my God, I can be whatever I want to be. And if that's a writer, if that's a poet, so be it. But I started reading Anne Sexton when I was probably about 16. Is that a little young to be reading someone like Anne Sexton? Yes and no. I don't think I'm the authority to talk on that because I found such a solace in her and I found such a kinship in her because besides doing your own, extracurricular research about Anne Sexton, you can tell from the poems that she is not well mentally. That's not an insult. That's not a bash. You can read my poems and you'd probably say the same thing. But there's a lot of conflict in her work. Also, there is just moments where she flat out talks about her time in the psych ward, her time being institutionalized. So it's not like it's a secret. She was very open with the fact that she was not well mentally. And I found a kinship in that because was, I don't know, because I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. Because it's concerning when a 16-year-old is saying, yeah, I'm thinking about killing myself. Guess what? That does not get you attention. Or it does, but not the right kind. I think when I think about Anne Sexton, I think about the quote that I think James Baldwin said, and I don't even remember it word for word. So this is just this is me remembering the quote, but it is something to do with art is important because you right now you think you're all alone. You think that no one has experienced what you have, and then you read Dostoevsky and you realize that he was going through the same thing 100 years ago. It says it in the quote 100 years. I know it was 200 years by now, but so it is that sort of thing where you feel alone. I felt alone, but then reading Anne Sexton, you think, "Oh, maybe I'm not. Maybe maybe mentally ill women have always been around and I'm just now finding them." But yeah, I've always even now I still feel a kinship with her because guess what? Still mentally ill. But I sorry. I think Anne Sexton often felt like she was going crazy, and I often feel like I am going crazy. So there is that kinship there. We're two mad women, and I don't think she would scoff at me saying that. I think she'd probably go a step further. She'd probably say that she's madder than I am, you know. But so I love Anne Sexton because I just feel such a kinship with her, and her words are so beautiful. She's sort of my influence. in my poetry. I'm not nearly, obviously, as great of a writer as she is. I'm not there yet. Will I ever be there? Probably not. But I just think she's great. I think she's brilliant. Now I'm going to talk about her work. I promise. I'm done with me, sort of. I personally, I think I enjoy her earlier work from 1960 to probably about 1969. Um, I love from To Bed Lemon partway back. I love All My Pretty Ones. I even like Love or Die. That's the one that won her the Pulitzer Prize, I believe. I just think those are just her peak works. I think those ones have had the most influence on me personally, and I think those are her works that have had the most influence on other people. When I think of her earlier work, when I think of the collections I just mentioned, I can name a few, I can name a number, I should say, of poems from those collections that I just love, that I adore. Wanting to Die, her most notable work, Some Foreign Letters, Her Kind, Unknown Girl in Maternity Ward, Housewife, The Truth Only the Dead Know. I can name a number of her poems from those collections that I just love and that I adore. Now here's where we get to the sort of awkward part. Again, I love Anne Sexton, but to me, there is a change in her writing, and there's a change in her personality through her writing. Around when she writes Transformations. Transformations is, I believe, dedicated. I don't believe. I know it is dedicated to her eldest daughter, Linda. And it's sort of retellings of Grim Fairy Tale stories because she loved Grim Fairy Tales. So that's her Transformations is her retelling it. Now, I do not like Transformations. I have read Transformations, or I've read poems from Transformations a number of times, and I cannot get myself to like it. It's not that it's bad. It's making sure the mic's still on. It's not that it's bad. It's not that it's terrible. I just can't get into them. There are, I will say, at the beginning of most poems, she has a few stanzas where I think she's talking about her life and how it relates to the fairy tale or aspects of it. You know what I mean. But I think Transformations is the turning point in her work. It was, let me check what year Transformation was. I believe it was 66. It was not 66. I was completely wrong. It was 71. So that's my bad. But that adds to that relates to what I said then, because her work from about 1960, 1969 is what I think is really great. And then the 70s is when things take a turn. And I think the turn starts, in my opinion, with Transformations. And I'm not saying that Transformations is where her work gets bad and then it's all bad for the rest of her life. But I don't know. It's when it starts for me to go a bit downhill. And it's not that, like I said, her works don't become bad or terrible or worse, but they become different. There is, in her earlier works, there's sadness and there's despair, but there's a hopeful sadness and despair. Like in Live or Die, she is clearly in despair. She clearly is not happy. She's not happy with her mind. She's not happy having to constantly go back to the institution, constantly having therapy. But she knows that people are there for her. She recognizes that her husband is there for her and that her two daughters are there for her. And they are definitely her rock and her staple in this time. So while she is not necessarily happy with her mental illness, because nobody is, she knows that she has to keep going. So I think that's why I like it a bit more. It's a bit more, as cliche as it sounds, it's a bit more inspiring. We're all in despair. We all have moments of depression and sadness and feeling like it's not going to get worse. But then we see something, we feel something, we hear something that reminds us that it does get better. We have people in our lives to remind us why we are here in the first place. And I think that's why I love the early poems so much. And after transformations, that hope stops. And I think that's what gets me. Not to say that there's no hopeful poems at all after transformations, but there's a lack of it. It's no longer despairing to hope, it's hoping to despair. So what I mean by that is she in the earlier works is sort of, I don't want to say it's there's a reluctance to be hopeful, as there typically is with people who are mentally ill. You don't want to get too hopeful because you'll just be disappointed, that sort of mentality. But the hope is still there. She's sort of like, I don't want to hope, but I know that I have to. I know that if I want to keep going, if I want to see my two daughters grow up, why am I getting emotional? Why am I getting emotional? Oh my god. She knows that if she wants to see her two daughters grow up, if she wants to continue being a poet, she has to hope. Whereas I feel like after Transformations and the Book of Folly, she's hoping to despair. She has decided that despair is what best suits her. And this depression and this sadness is the only answer. I think, unfortunately, Anne Sexton fell into the trap that most of us do, which is to be an artist is to be in despair. To be an artist is to suffer, because that's what we've been fed all our lives. We've been fed all our lives that Van Gogh chopped off his ear because he was sad. And that's what it means to be an artist. If you want to paint like Van Gogh, if you want to write like Anne Sexton, you better chop off your ear. You better kill yourself via carbon monoxide poisoning, which is just not the case. I think I'm I think I say that it's not the case because I've also fallen into that trap where I need to suffer to make good art. And I think David Lynch, talking about David Lynch now, he's talked about this before, but in order to make good art, he's made the argument, in order to make art, you need to be happy. Because if you're depressed, you don't want to do anything. You're not like, aha, let me go write, let me go write a 500-page book, or, let me go paint this masterpiece, even though I'm depressed and have to, I couldn't get out of the bed in the morning. That's not what it means to do art. It means to be happy, because if you're happy while writing, you're making good art. And I don't think Anne Sexton believed that towards the end of her life. After Transformations, after the Book of Folly, when we start getting into the Death Notebooks, and there's one before that, hang on. I was wrong. It's the Book of Folly, the Death Notebooks, and then the Awful Road Towards God. Now, I do also like the Death Notebooks and the Awful Road Towards God, but again, there's a shift there. There's a difference. And I think this is also shown by her conversion. I don't quite know when she started getting super religious. I think she was brought up with sort of the Puritan values. I mean, obviously, she was born in 1928, peak conservative times. But she sort of stopped that, or she sort of maybe distanced herself from that. But in the beginning of the 70s, I think, is when she started her conversion. And I don't know if it was official conversion or not, but she started to build a relationship back with God. Now, that is not detrimental to her work, because she has some good poems that are God related, Jesus related. But there's a definite difference. I keep saying that. I promise I'm going to explain what I fucking mean. Jesus Christ. There's a difference, because It's the poems are almost about repentance now. It's sort of, it feels like both the Death Note books and the Awful Road Towards God feel like she's trying to repent before she dies. It feels like she's trying to make her peace with God, with Christ, and trying to, I feel like this is going to sound bad, but I don't know. It feels like she's trying to make her peace so that she gets into heaven. Because I think she was maybe afraid that the things that she had done throughout her life, like cheat on her husband, like have an abortion, maybe even the miscarriages she had, I feel like she thought that that would affect her getting into heaven and her relationship with God. So there's definitely, that's a big, big change in her writing. Is now it's very, very God focused. The Awful Rowing Towards God, every single poem is about God. Every single poem is about Christ trying to get back in their favor, trying to I don't know, trying to be seen by them. And I think, I don't want to say it's a cry for help because that sounds kind of rude to say you're religious now and it's a cry for help. But that's what it feels like. It feels like she's calling on God, calling on Jesus to show her, to tell her everything's going to be okay and it's all going to work out. But they're not answering her. They're not answering her. She's not getting an answer. So she's trying to reach out, to hear that voice of God, to hear that voice of Jesus, and it's just not working. And I think that's killing her inside. And I don't mean to like psychoanalyze Anne Sexton and be like her relationship with God was because of this and da 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 da. Because I mean, don't do that to me. I wouldn't like that done to me, so why would I do it to her? But it definitely feels like her converting, her trying to get back into favor with religious figures is her trying to make amends before she dies. And that is sort of a good segue into another reason why I feel like these sort of last compilation of poems are so different. I think I feel like they are different. Besides the obvious changes in her tone and her, she goes from rhyming to free verse. Um, I think there's a change there because I know what happens. I was reading, I think it was Live or Die. It might actually have been Transformations too. But this sort of feeling of dread came over me because I realized that I know how Anne Sexton's story ends. And there's nothing I can do to change it. I the best way I can describe this is by using the example of Twin Peaks. So we're going to hope that you've seen Twin Peaks. If you haven't, it's fine. You'll know what I mean. The main character, not the main character, but the main figure of Twin Peaks is Laura Palmer, who dies in the first episode, who we find her body in the first episode, and she haunts the narrative all the way through season 2. And even in the season 3, is it technically season 3, the one in 2017? She haunts that narrative all the way through. Now, in Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me, which is the movie, which is a prequel to the series, um, it's about Laura. It's about Laura Palmer's life leading up to her murder. I watched it. I don't think I'll ever watch it again because it is so devastating and heartbreaking for a number of reasons. You know, Laura Palmer is every female figure ever. It's a devastating story. But I found it very hard to digest because you know what happens. I felt like a voyeur. I'm watching this teenage girl go get drunk, have sex, do drugs, do all these things, and I am just watching her, and I can't help her. And I know that she's going to die, and there's nothing that I can do about it. I just have to watch. I have to watch somebody self destruct. I have to watch somebody destroy and betray themselves for nothing. And that's how I feel with Anne Sexton when I'm reading these last few compilations of her work. I know what is going to happen. I know that she is going to kill herself. I know that it's by carbon monoxide in her car. I know that it happened in October of 1974. And I can't change that fact. I can't change the fact that two girls, I think Linda was 20 something at this time, 22, and so Joy would have been about 20. I can't change the fact that two women, young women, are going to lose their mother. And I think that's what kills me. I'm reading this woman's last thoughts, essentially, before she dies. And that's so hard for me to do because, again, I can't help her. Not that even, I mean, even if I was around in like the 1960s, 1970s, I probably couldn't help her. And that's the worst part of it all. Her last compilations, while she was alive at least, which is Death Notebooks and The Awful Road Towards God, feel like, I don't want to say a descent into madness, because that's not what it is. I don't feel like it is. But it's definitely a descent into despair and sadness and hopelessness, which again, I think that's the hardest part for me, because she's not, it's like she stopped trying. And I don't mean, I don't say that to be rude, and I hope that that doesn't come across rude, but it really feels like she was giving up and letting God. Was that the term? Giving up and letting God. Is that the term? But you know what I mean, where she's just sort of like, God, Christ, my life is in your hands. Do what you see fit. If it's to continue this life of misery, then that's the life I will serve to you. If it's to end this life of misery, then that's what I will do to join you. And I think I don't know, that just kills me. It just kills me. And again, I think maybe it kills me because I do have that kinship with her. And maybe there is that sort of fear, fear that I will end up like that I will become sort of a Jesus freak and just give up and and just hand over my life to Christ. There is that fear that will happen to me. But hey, time will tell with that. So that's pretty much all I have. I just think Anne Sexton is such a interesting person. She is such a brilliant writer, and I think she got a lot of slack for it at the time when she was writing in the 60s. But they didn't understand you like I understand you, Anne. Okay? Rip Anne Sexton, you would have loved Halsey's. Rip Anne Sexton, you would have loved Halsey, number one. You would have loved Halsey's The Great Impersonator album, okay? She absolutely would have loved that. But that's all I have. I just wanted to talk about Anne Sexton for a bit. I love her work. I admire her work so very, very much. That's it. Thank you guys for watching.